No, sir, your voice is just connecting. Uh, so you're not audible. Your audio is not connected. Oh. Uh,
Am I audible now?
yes, sir. Shall
Okay.
we begin?
You can start.
Okay. So, good evening, everyone. I am Aryan Gupta, the host of today's session, and I, on the whole behalf of the whole Juice Corpus team, welcome you all in today's session on atrocities on Hindu community in Bangladesh, a human rights perspective. Before we delve into today's discussion, let me provide you a brief introduction of Just Corpus and the eminent guest speaker of the day, Mr. Mrityunjay Pratap Singh. Just Corpus is a body of legal professionals who have come together to bring various aspects and chains of law under a single umbrella. Just Corpus, an edtech platform set up in 2020, has a wide reach of 6 lakh clicks per month on an average basis on our website. The inspiration was derived from the ever-growing need for law students. Just Corpus has now also incorporated an interdisciplinary journal and a multidisciplinary journal as its subsidiaries named as the Just Corpus Law Journal and the International Journal of Legal Research, Education and Social Sciences. Now turning our attention to today's focal point, we are privileged to have Mr. Mrityunjay Pratap Singh as our esteemed speaker. Sir is currently working as a teaching assistant and research scholar at the School of Law, Bennett University. Before joining the Bennett University, he was working as an assistant professor of law at college affiliated with Lucknow University. Currently, he is pursuing a PhD and has done his LLM and LLB and BA from the University of Lucknow. He is an avid researcher of his area and includes constitutional law, human rights law, and laws related to the armed forces. He has presented and published various articles in reputed conferences and journals. So, without further ado, sir, the mic is now yours. Please provide your insights in the topic.
Okay. Thank you, Aaron, for this introduction. Now, without delaying any further, I would like to share my PPT with you all. So, today's topic of discussion is atrocities on Hindus in Bangladesh. So, a brief introduction of this topic is this presentation will explore the historical context, ongoing challenges, and the need for the international attention regarding the violation of human rights and prosecution of Hindu communities in Bangladesh. So, here we will discuss all the aspects related to the minorities or the Hindus in Bangladesh and the ongoing condition and the challenges which are faced by the minority community in a nation where there is no stability of government and there is lack of administration. So before moving further, we we need to understand the historical context of the nation that is Bangladesh. So the history of the Bangladesh starts from the partition of the India in the year 1947, from where we can see that India was divided into India and Pakistan was further divided into two parts, that is East Pakistan and Pakistan. So Bangladesh previously was the Pakistan, which was made a separate nation in the year 1971, and which by which the creation of Bangladesh in 1971 it resulted in further upheaval and political tensions. These historical events created an environment of religious insecurity and mistrust, contributing to the vulnerability of Hindu minorities in Bangladesh. As we all know, the sole basis of the creation of the Pakistan during the partition of 1947 was the religion. Few people thought that two communities or two religions cannot coexist peacefully in a nation. That's why a separate nation was created, which is known as Pakistan. And after that, many circumstances followed the events, and in the year 1971, a new government came into existence, that is Bangladesh. So when we realize and when we go through the struggle of the Bangladesh and creation of Bangladesh, then we see that Bangladesh was initially of the partition was a part of the Bengal in India, and Bengal was a state or was a region which was always forward in all the manners like education, intellect, even in revolts also. As we when we go through the history of the India, we can observe Ba- Bengal was a region which initiated and which came as leader in the revolt against the Britishers in India. So that region specifically contained all the communities. And when we further dwell deep into the history of the Bengal, then we can see that in 16th and 17th centuries there were so many leaders, or we can say there were so many rulers which were from different communities other than Hindus, and the impact of those rulers was seen in the regionality and the ethnicity of the Bengal. So from there, from 15th, 16th century, we need to observe and we need to analyze all the historical perspective of that specific region to understand more the issue of religion, or we can say that issue of minority. When we talk about atrocities against the Hindus in Bangladesh, then we can also term this statement as the atrocities against minorities in Bangladesh. So when we talk about minorities, there are so many provisions related to the minorities. And when we talk about the definition of minorities, then we can see that the United Nations defines a minority as a group of people who share a common identity and make up less than half of the population in the state. Less than half of the population means, in normal language, we can say that every population which is less than 50% in numbers is a minority in a nation or in a country. The UN recognizes four categories of minorities, that is national, ethnic, religious, and linguistic. So, United Nations provided these four grounds on which a community can be termed as minority in any nation or in any region. After that, the UN Minorities Declaration was adopted in the year 1992, which promotes and protects the rights of minorities. The declaration's purpose is to contribute to the political and social stability of states where minorities live. So before going further into the topic and discussing about the current situation of the Hindus, I'll discuss some human rights perspective before going exactly into the topic. So this was the minorities definition given by the United Nations, which is somehow acceptable all over the globe. After that, when we talk about the human rights of the minorities, the human rights are those basic rights which are necessary for the existence and dignified and peaceful life of an individual in any region or in any country. So whether they are minority or they constitute the majority group in that specific area. So when we discuss about the human rights of the minorities, then these rights mainly include the non-discrimination provisions. That means no individual, whether they belong to minority or to the majority or to any specific community, will not be discriminated on any ground. Further, we can see that equality is the provision which is one of the most important human rights given to the every individual all across the globe, where we can ensure that every person and every individual is treated equally and no discrimination made regarding their caste, age, place of birth, or the religion. Specifically, when we talk about the minorities, then protection of existence as minorities. Protection of existence as minorities means, like we can see in the Constitution of India also, there are certain provisions which provide specific protection to the minorities living across the Indian territory. So this provision means minorities which are existing in any in any area or in any country, they must be provided with the protection by the law. This protection can be any kind, like when we talk about the Indian continent, or when we talk about the Constitution of India, there we can say that, there we can see that so many provisions like establishment of the educational institution, promotion of the religion, etc., and so many other provisions are given under the Constitution to protect the existence of the minorities in the country. Further, the enjoyment of their own culture, religion, and language. When we talk about the minorities, so the minorities are the people which are least in number in any area, and they have their own specific culture, religion, and languages. To protect these culture, religion, and language, the international provisions and the national provisions work to protect it as a basic human rights to provide a dignified life to the individual. And when we talk about the enjoyment of their own culture, religion, and language, then it means enjoyment should not be only consolidated to a single person, but there should be effective participation in the cultural, religious, social, economic, and public life. Here, I would like to mention, when we see the status of minorities in different country, then there are so many loopholes which are not following, which are not implementing the provisions of human rights, but there it is necessary to secure that the person belonging to the minorities should effectively participate in all the activities like cultural, religious, economic, and social activities, so that they have their own presence in that area, and they can even feel stronger as a community in that specific region. And after that, these were the basic human rights which are necessary for the minorities. After that, when we see that there are so many risks which are faced by some which are faced by every minority community in any nation, not specifically about Bangladesh or India, but all over the globe. When we see the different nations, and when we observe the minorities staying there and living there, then we can see that there are so many risks which are only faced by the minority communities. One of the above is the discrimination. When we talk about minority in general sense also, then there is a term which always comes in our mind, that is discrimination. So discrimination can be of any kind, like of religion, of societal status, or of the economic status, or of the ethnicity. Any kind of discrimination can be seen against the minority communities in any of the area all across the world. After that, the exclusion from participation in social, cultural, and economic affairs. There are so many incidents recently we have seen through the global media and the global news channels, that specifically when we see the Middle East region, and after that when we observe the present conditions of the Bangladesh, our neighbor nation, when we not go further and we just observe our neighbor nation Pakistan, there also we can see the exclusion from the participation in social, cultural, and economic affairs. Recently, a news came from the Pakistan that a person who belongs to a Hindu community from Sindh region of the Pakistan became the first officer in the forces of the Pakistan. So when we observe this trend, then we can see that after even the 70 plus years of the formation of the Pakistan, this was the first incidence when a person from a minority community became a officer in the forces of the Pakistan. So when we observe all the situations and all the countries and the situations of the minorities over there, then we can see that there is a discrimination, and there are so many discrimination which are going against the minorities in each and every nation. After that, this discrimination and this exclusion from participation in all the activities results into poverty. We can see that when we don't allow any specific individual or any specific community to participate in all the cultural and economic affairs, then as a result of it, poverty comes in the highlight, or poverty is the key factor in that community, because they don't have access to the resources and they don't have access to the opportunities which are provided by the region or by the nation as a citizen. When this all these all risks are a series of events which also result into the lack of access to justice. When there would not be any participation in the social cultural activities, and there would be limited access to the education, and there would be poverty in any community, then it is obvious that that community or that minority group will lack in getting the justice, and the lag in getting the services in that reason. And when we see the human rights, the whole idea of the human right in this world is to secure and provide justice to each and every individual, irrespective of any discrimination, and irrespective of any religion, place, anything. So these are the risks which are somehow more or less faced by every minority groups in all the countries. And as a result of all these risks, there would be physical violence and trafficking. The crimes like trafficking will take place in that specific region. And because, as we know, there is a natural phenomena, the vulnerable or the weak community re- is always uh, on the uh, uh, on the minority status, and there would be physical violence against those communities in that specific region. When we talk about the provisions under UDHR, then UDHR, that is Universal Declaration of Human Rights, this does not explicitly mention the words minority or ethnicity, but it does recognize the rights of religious minorities through other means. These are all the basic rights which we have discussed just now, like freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of association, freedom of contact. Freedom of contact means there should be a freedom to every individual to contact with any person or any kind of person to whom that person specifically wants or likes. That means you would not be stopped to meet or to talk with any person who is under a lawful, or who is living a legal or a free life in any nation. Participation in decision making is a factor, or is a point which provides strength to the minority communities in any specific area. When any person or any individual or any representative from the minority communities is included in the decision making group or in the decision making policies of any nation, then this brings strength to whole community, as they see their representative or the person belonging to their community is given that much importance, which makes them feel stronger. Participation in the economy means all the this specifically means all the provisions which we discussed just now, that they should be provided equal access to the resources, and they must be given the equal opportunity to conduct their own businesses and to participate directly or indirectly in the economy to make their community and the nation stronger. After that, one of the most important uh, point is the language rights, which is least discussed nowadays. And when we talk about the language rights, then we can see that we can find out, specifically in the Bangladesh, we can see there is a fight, or there is a tussle between the peoples belonging to one language and peoples belonging to another language. The Bangla language which exists in the region of the Bengal before the independence, that became one of the major language of that nation. But there are some communities, there are some group of people who use different language also, and this happens in every nation of this world. So the provisions under UDHR protect these language rights so that a person or a community can ensure that their language is protected and they are free to speak their language. The right to learn one's mother tongue or have instruction in one's mother tongue. The UDHR also includes other rights such as the right to be free from torture, the right to freedom of expression, the right to education, and the right to seek asylum. Right to seek asylum means you can get the asylum from any government or any specific person from which you want or from when you like. After that, there is a specific declaration on the rights of persons belonging to national, ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities. So, when we see the global perspective of the human rights, basically with relation to the religion, then there is not a specific provision under UDHR about the religious minority or even the under the declaration on the rights of persons. There is a declaration which includes the national or ethnic, religious and linguistic minorities. So every kind of minorities, almost every kind of minority is included under this declaration. The Article 1 of this declaration states that states shall protect the existence and national or ethnic, cultural, religious, and linguistic identity of minorities within their respective territories and shall encourage conditions for the promotion of that identity. This article does not specifically discuss about the religion but gives provisions regarding the religion and protection of their human rights in the international perspective, which all the nations need to follow. After that, there is Article 2, in which it is mentioned that persons belonging to national or ethnic, religious, and linguistic minorities have the right to enjoy their own culture, to profess and practice their own religion, and to use their own language in private and in public freely and without interference or any form of discrimination. When we relate this article and this provision with the current situation of Bangladesh, then there we can see that all the provisions given under these articles are violated in Bangladesh in today's scenario. There, all the places of worship, their language, their free movement, and their practices are being violated or has been stopped. Places of worship have been worships has been demolished to violate the basic human rights or to conduct the atrocities against the Hindu community in that area. After that, there is Article 4, which states that states shall take measures where required to ensure that persons belonging to minorities may exercise fully and effectively all their human rights and fundamental freedoms without any discrimination and in full equality before the law. This article specifically talks about the duties of the states as the protector of the human rights of the minorities. And when we relate this Article 4 with the Bangladesh or with the current situation of Bangladesh, there we can see that all the series of events which are happening in Bangladesh today are due to or one of the main reason behind these events is the failure of the state. And when state fails to protect the rights of the minorities, then we can see that there can be anything other than the human rights. Now we will come to the discrimination against the Hindu minority in Bangladesh. So when we see the today's scenario, then we can see that there is a systematic discrimination against the Hindus and there is a harassment of Hindu minorities in Bangladesh. When we go into the history of Bangladesh, there is a series of events which takes place from the year 1972, that is from the uh, formation of Bangladesh itself. At that time there was a massacre and there were so many violations of human rights and there were so many crimes which were regarded as against the human race. From there, so many series of events happened which gave result to today's situation of Bangladesh. So there is always been a discrimination against Hindus. Hindus in Bangladesh face systematic discrimination in various aspects of life, including employment, education, and political representation. When we see the political representation of the people in Bangladesh, whether at local level or at the national level or even at the international level, then we can see that there are very less number of people who belong to the minority community, specifically with which belong to the Hindus in that nation. As we know, before formation of Bangladesh, that region was a majority Islamic nation, and the mere foundation of that formation of that region was the religion. So from that time only, it is seen that Hindus in Bangladesh face systematic discrimination, which includes the discrimination in the employment, education, and the political representation. And when we discriminate any community on these grounds, then that community somehow becomes a weaker community in that specific region. When we talk about harassment, they are frequently subjected to harassment, intimidation, and verbal abuse based on their religious identity. When we study the liberation war of Bangladesh, then we can find so many datas in different reports that various war crimes and various crimes against the human rights, like rapes, harassment of the women, crime against children, and the violation of human rights during the war and even after the war, took place in that nation. And this harassment continued till today. When we see the reports of so many uh, so many newspapers and so many international journals, then we can find out. Recently I was going through a report which was published by the Hindu, uh, a renowned newspaper, on 30th November of 2024. It mentioned the three temples in Chattogram of Bangladesh were vandalized. This was the uh, simple news uh, in our country. But when we look upon the reports and all the news coming from that specific country, then we can see that in from past 6 months or even before that, there there is a discrimination against Hindus and there are harassments against Hindus, due to which they are always socially marginalized, and they are often marginalized and excluded from social and economic opportunities, limiting their advancement and integration. When we see the condition of Hindus during when the Bangladesh was formed and even before that and today, then there is not a big change, or there is any specific change which we can say that made that community or made Hindus stronger in that nation. Because when you don't provide a political representation, or when you discriminate any community on the political grounds and in the employment, and one of the above, that is on the grounds of education, that then it is ensured that that community would not come into the main scenario of that country even. So after that, when we see today's scenario, then we can see that attacks on Hindu temples, homes, and businesses is more often in that nation nowadays. Hindu temples have been targeted in numerous attacks, vandalized, and destroyed. We all have gone through so many newses, so many photographs, videos, and reports which shown that there were the vandalization of temples. The even smaller temples were targeted. Even today they are targeted in that country. One of the recent example of a priest belonging to a specific institution, he urged to every person belonging to Hindu community to protect their rights and to protect their temples. After that, the one of the most important place in a person's life, that is their home, where that person feels secured and protected in every aspect. So when we see about the Hindu community in Bangladesh, Hindus' homes have been subjected to the arson. They were looted. There was so much of violence, displacing families and creating fear. When we see into the recent violence going in the Bangladesh, then we can see that the houses of the Hindu community or of the minority community are attacked They are looted, and the families staying in those houses are forcefully displaced, and are displaced by creating the fear of life. And after that, when we talk about the economic activities, businesses, so Hindu owned businesses have been vandalized and forced to close, contributing to economic hardship and social instability. When we talk about the strength of a nation, then we can say that economy is one of the most stronger pillar of a nation, to make that nation strong or to make that nation a weak nation. And that economy is run by the businesses, whether small or large, in any nation. So when we talk about Bangladesh, the all the businesses, whether the small scale industries or the big industries, all are targeted, uh, all are targeted by the groups which are involved in the violence, and they vandalized all the institutions and all the businesses of the Hindus, and they are forced to close their businesses, which resulted into economic hardship and social instability in that nation. When we talk about the violence, then the most weaker section of the society which face the violence, or which face with against whom the violence is done, that is children and women. So when we look into the situation of Bangladesh, there is a forced conversion and abductions of Hindu women. The violence which taking place in that nation is on the grounds of religion. So the forced conversion is taking place in that country. It means if you belong to a specific community, then your life would be protected, and if you will not convert, or if you will not accept all the terms and conditions of the majority community, then your life would be at risk or at the danger, or somehow you can killed also. So there is a forced conversion in that nation. After that, there is abductions of Hindu women. Hindu women are targeted by the violent groups. They are abducted, they are coerced into marriage, and they are forced to abandon their religious identity. There are so many other different crimes against the women, like rape, sexual abuse, physical harassment, and all the crimes which can be done against a women are happening in that country by the violent group against the Hindu women. When when we talk about the violence, that violence means somehow the administration or the state has failed to protect the law and order, to secure the law and order of that specific country. And when law and order is demolished or becomes weaker, then there are so many crimes, like specifically like human trafficking. This practice is linked to the human trafficking and exploitation, violating the basic human rights of the women. When we see the whole trafficking crime, or whole the crime related to trafficking, then there are majority of two groups which are trafficked, uh, of whom the trafficking is done. One is children and another one is women, for the different purposes. So now in Bangladesh, there is a practice of human trafficking and exploitation against the women and children, which itself is the violation of human rights. And when we see all the series of events of past 50 years, or even the past 5 6 months, then we can see that there is a uh, systematic series of events which led to the displacement of Hindus population and exodus to India. The basic of this exodus is the fear. Every violence is based on a base, that is fear. First, a fear has been created against minorities. That fear can be of any kind of the life, or of the human rights, or of the dignity, or any kind of fear. That fear is created within the minorities. On the basis of that fear, violence is done against the minorities. And a person who is in fear, that person always tries to protect their family and themselves first, without considering, or without discussing about their rights, which a peaceful nation or a person residing in peaceful nation can discuss. So this fear leads to violence. Recently, Bangladesh has seen so much of violence against the minorities, which was specifically based on the grounds of fear. And this violence leads to displacement. When we talk about normal or the general condition of a human being, then we can see that the main idea or main objective of any human being is to live a peaceful and dignified life. And when there would not be any peace, there would be harm to dignity, and there would not any protection from the states, then this will result into the displacement of that person or of that community from that specific region. And when, as India is the neighboring nation of the Bangladesh, so it is the most nearer nation to the Bangladesh, and India and Bangladesh share some traditional, cultural, and ethnic similarities between them. So when the displacement is taking place in the Bangladesh, this results to the exodus to India. That means people or the minorities who are being uh, being tortured or who are facing the violation of human rights, they are coming or they are displacing to the Indian territories, which which is another point of discussion under the human rights and under the global perspective. Will not go deeper into that point now. So this is a series of event which is taking place against the minorities in the Bangladesh. Due to these violations of human rights and due to this violence, this results to the lack of protection and justice for the Hindu victims. As I have told previously, that whole idea of human rights to provide justice and to protect justice of each and every individual all over the world. So these series of events and these atrocities against the Hindus in Bangladesh, they are resulting into the injustice to the Hindu. First of all, there is lack of protection. Victims often find it difficult to access protection from law enforcement and face delays in investigation. As we have discussed, when there would not be any political representation of the minority community in any nation, then there would be lack of protection and there would be injustice against that community as they don't have their specific representation in the main administration or in the main system of that nation. This also results to denied justice. Perpetrators often go unpunished, reinforcing a culture to impunity and fostering further violence. When the voice of one community is unheard and they are not protected, this gives strength to the violent groups and the person who are violating the rules. This makes them stronger, and uh, they conduct or they do the crimes more oftenly. So this results into the rapid rate or the increased rate of crime against the minority in Bangladesh. There is also a fear of retaliation. Many victims fear retaliation and are reluctant to come forward, further hindering justice. As we discussed, fear is the base of all the violences all across the world. When a person who is not strongly represented in the administration, who don't have any political right, who don't have any proper representation, who don't have any economic and social participation, then that person, and when that person becomes a victim, and so the fear, all the fears which that person is facing results into the fear of retaliation, which further results into the injustice in the community. So these were the perspectives and different points related to the Hindu minorities in the Bangladesh. When we talk about the ongoing challenges and the need of international attention, so the first challenge in this regard is the security. There is a need of ensuring the physical security and the safety of Hindus in Bangladesh is the paramount. It is one of the most important and highlighted factor to protect the Hindu community in Bangladesh, to ensure their dignified life and to ensure the human rights of those people. belonging to Hindu community, and to protect the cultural and ethnic uniqueness of that country. Another challenge is to provide justice, holding perpetrators accountable for violence and ensuring justice for victims. There is a concept when justice is denied to a person of any specific community, then they all the person belonging to that specific community have one thing in mindset, that they are deprived of the justice in that nation. So it's high time to protect the justice of the Hindus in the uh, Bangladesh. When we talk about the human rights, then the equality is the key factor, or one of the most important human rights for any individual. So there is a need of promoting equality and inclusion for all religious minorities in Bangladesh. When we talk about the religious minorities in Bangladesh, then there is not only specific Hindu community. There are Jains, there are Buddhist, and there are different other communities who are in minority status in the Bangladesh. So all these communities need to be provided with the justice, and they are need to be protected, and they are need to provide equality with the majority community, so that they can uplift their self, their own. So when we talk about the result, or when we talk about the conclusion, so there is a need of accountability and safeguarding of minority rights. As we can see in Bangladesh, there is not a strong government or a stable government. So a stable government leads to the making of a strong nation. This is a basic uh, point of any country. So when you have a weak government, then all the crimes and all the violation of human rights takes place in that country. So there is need of accountability of the governments to safeguard the minority rights. It is necessary to bring this issue, or the atrocities happening against the Hindus in Bangladesh on a global perspective, and to bring it into the limelight on the global platforms like Human Rights Commission or the UN, United Nations, so that all the countries who are facing the issues like atrocities against minorities, specifically the nations who are going through the wars and who are going through the conflicts with their neighboring countries, the rights of those minorities can also be protected. And when we talk about the Hindus in Bangladesh, it is a high time, or it is necessary to protect the rights of Hindus in the Bangladesh. But as a individual, or as a advocate of human rights, I would like to say, the all the nations who are facing the atrocities against the minorities, whether it is the region of Middle East, whether it is the nation of Pakistan, or whether it is the Bangladesh, or even if any incidents is happening in our own country, that is India, then this issue should be uh, uh, must be brought into the highlight, and must be discussed on the national and international forums to protect the minorities, their religion, their linguistic status, their education, and all the cultural and ethnic uh, identities which are necessary for the existence of an individual. So I think this is enough from my side.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for the insightful session, sir. We do have a few questions.
Huh, okay.
So the first question is, what can and what we as Indians can do to help the plight of Hindus in Bangladesh?
Okay. So, as Indian, we can see that India is becoming one of the most strong and developing countries in the world. As we know, we have a stable government, we have a strong government, and we have a strong infrastructure which is protecting us from all these kind of crimes or the violations of human rights. So as India, or the Indian governments has that strong stand in the international perspective, or in the international forum, that when the authorities of India will discuss this issue on the international forums, then this issue would be considered by all the countries who are facing such crimes against the minorities. And above that, as Indian, and as the neighboring country of the Bangladesh, at every individual level, we should try to help to overcome this situation from Bangladesh by providing as we know, we are in the era of technology, and we all have access to the internet, and we all have access to the newses and all the reports which are coming from that nation. So as a Indian, we can do some research on that purpose, on that issues, and make that issue in front of the government, so that this challenge or these point can be brought into the global perspective. That is the only reason, that is the only thing which we as Indian we can do. And the people, and as a community, when we talk about the Hindu community, the people residing in India, they can even provide some assistance like economic assistance or any assistance which they can provide to people in Bangladesh on a collective level.
Uh, Thank you so much for that question, sir. The next question we have is, what implications do the recent targeted attack on Hindus in Bangladesh hold for the country's very secular fabric and the constitutional promise of religious equality? And how can more reasonable mechanisms like the SARC
And
play
sorry,
a
but can
role
you
in
please speak a
mitigating
little
communal
louder?
violence? So the question is, what implications do the targeted attack on Hindus in Bangladesh hold for the secular fabric of Bangladesh and the country's constitutional promise of religious equality? Also, how can mechanisms like SARC play a role in mitigating the communal violence?
So when we talk about the democracy or of about the secular country, so democracy itself means every individual have equal participation in the formation of the government and in the administration of the nation. And when we talk about the secularism, secularism means everyone should be treated equally irrespective of the religion. To understand this perspective of the secularism, secular fabric in Bangladesh, we have to go into the history of Bangladesh from the 1930s, or when we consider after the independence, after the 1947. That's why I mentioned not only about the Bangladesh, I mentioned about the Bengal, which existed before the formation of Pakistan or the Bangladesh. Every nation which is formed recently, or every nation have a religious uniqueness. When we talk about like our neighbor country Pakistan and Bangladesh, then we can see there is so much of similarity between the culture, religion, practices. And especially when we talk about Bangladesh, there are people who today also they have their agricultural land in Bangladesh, they go to cultivate uh, there, and they return, that these kind of practices happening over there. And when we talk about the legal perspective of the of the protection of the secular fabric, it is essential for any government or any constitution to protect and provide some special rights to the minorities, to protect their basic human rights. As we all know, the minorities are the weaker section of the society if they are not provided with the equal opportunities. In Bangladesh, we can see that after the formation of Bangladesh or the Bangladesh Liberation War, there was a domination of majority community. So the secular fabric of Bangladesh started demolishing or started diminishing from that phase only. There we when we see the regional dimensions of the Bangladesh, there the businesses, the small businesses and the large scale industries are the majorly owned by the majority communities. So we can say that the constitution of Bangladesh or the government of Bangladesh somehow failed to protect the minority rights, because the result which we are seeing there is not a result of one day incidents or a one day practice or anything. This is a series of events. So it is necessary to form a strong government in Bangladesh, and the government which talks about the protection of human rights of all the individuals, and which talks about the protection of rights of minorities.
Thank you for that answer, sir. So the next question we have is, why does the UN not take a stand against such inhuman activities as declared in the UDHR?
Okay, so when we talk about the role of UN, from the formation of UN. as we know, the before the formation of UN, there was a League of Nations which totally failed in achieving their objectives. That's why the United Nations came into existence, and that's why the United Nations was formed. So from the day when the United Nations is formed, the main objective of United Nations is to protect the basic human rights, to protect the violence, uh, to protect the violence against the minorities, or to protect the violence against any person who is belonging to minority community, and to eradicate the war crimes, etc., etc. There are so many provisions under the UN, and it's a matter of international politics. When we see about the role of UN just acts as a observing body which takes actions when it is necessary, and it takes action through the states only. When we talk about the UN missions which are going in the Africa region or in the Middle East region, when we can see that, then we can see that UN takes the help of the stronger nations and the nations who have stable government to protect the rights of the people who are staying in some unstable or violent countries. So till today, as I have told, India as a neighboring country needs to mention this case, and needs to mention this violence and these atrocities of Hindus on a global level. I think there is a lack of information, or there is a lack of representation of this issue on the global level. I think when there would be the proper representation and proper address of this issue at the global platforms, then UN will take some action. We can hope for the best. And another perspective is कि Bangladesh is a separate country, and they have a government. When we see about the government of the Bangladesh today, also they have a government. Whether they are able to protect the rights of minorities or not, that is another point of discussion. So when a nation is having a government which is accepted by the citizens, then it is difficult for the UN to interfere in the administration of that government. Like we have seen so many newses in which the present government of Bangladesh claimed that they are protecting the rights of minorities. They are not accepting that violence is going against the minorities in that country. So in that situation, UN just acts as a observing body and waits for the perfect time to come.
Thank you for that answer, sir. So one of the question we have is, as the violence on Hindus is seen from so many years by neighboring countries, and it is still in motion. And there was also debate about the same in the UK Parliament, recently on 2nd December. So considering that it is being seen as an international issue on an international stage, how does international law specifically deal with this?
Sorry, what's the last line you spoke?
As the violence on Hindus is seen from many years, and it is still in motion. And regarding the same, there was also a debate in the UK Parliament on the 2nd of December. So considering that this has been seen by the international community on an international stage, how does the ACA, how does international law specifically deal with this case?
Okay. So when we talk about the Hindu communities, especially in the neighboring countries of the India, that is Bangladesh, Pakistan, or Afghanistan, the issue against the atrocities of Hindus is not new in today's scenario. It is prevalent from the time of even pre-independence. There are there are so many cases in the history which we can see which were happened only due to the religious conflict, like the violence in West Bengal, and the violence during the partition, and the violence during the wars between the India and Pakistan, the violence during the and crimes during the liberation war of Bangladesh. So this issue is not new, which everyone knows. As you told, this issue was discussed in UK Parliament also. This issue is discussed on the international forum from so many past years. Like uh, in the 90s, during the in the 90s, when the crime against the Hindus were happening in the Kashmir, this issue was discussed on the UN forum also. So I would like to say many international organizations are working in this regard, and this issue is always been tried to be discussed on international level so that the international laws and the provisions can be followed between the India or some other country or between some other countries, uh, specifically in Pakistan or in Bangladesh. As we all know, before 1971, Bangladesh was also the Pakistan only, and so the base of Pakistan, the base of the formation of Pakistan was the a religious nation. Especially Pakistan was formed as a Muslim country. So when we talk about the countries which are formed on the basis of religion, then in those countries the crime against minorities is one of the most common factor which we can see. This is happening in Pakistan also. When we see about the datas in 1950s, the population of Hindus in Pakistan, and when we compare that population in today's population, then they became so much less in number. When we talk about specifically some reason, then in Pakistan only Sindh is the state, or Sindh is the region where Hindus are in some considered number. Otherwise, the numbers of Hindu population has been uh, decreasing day by day in Pakistan. The same is happening with the Bangladesh. So this issue is the old age issue, and this is discussed on the international forums, and every country, every nation who is claiming to be a strong nation or who is claiming to be leader of the world, they know this issue. But there is a convention or a unwritten convention or a tradition in the international laws or in the international perspective that not no third nation interferes between the problems of the two nations until and unless those nations go to that nation for the help. As we have seen in the issue of Kashmir, uh, both the nation went to UN for getting the solution on the Kashmir issue. So when I think as a nation or as a neighboring nation, India will go to UN or with regard to these cases, and the even the government of these nations like Bangladesh and Pakistan, even if they themselves will go to the UN, then there would be some solution. And the most important thing, as I've discussed, we need a stronger government to run a nation strongly, and these both nations have a unstable and weaker government from the day of formation. We can see the Pakistan also, we can see the Bangladesh also, even we can see the Afghanistan also. So stability or the protection of human rights come with the stronger government in a democracy. And if in a democracy government is not stable, then there would be such kind of atrocities against any community. So, as a citizen, the people of Pakistan and the people of Bangladesh needs to form a strong and stable government with the proper representation of the minorities. And as a neighbor, we Indians need to address these issues on the international forums.
Sir, given these atrocities, is there some probability that there is actually, like, given that slaughter against Hindus is going on in Bangladesh, is there a probability that in any time we might get to see that we might be forced for an armed intervention into this conflict, like the one that happened in 1971? Like, is an armed intervention possible in this, in
Armed,
such a case?
intervention by whom? By India or their internal forces?
So by like a rebellion or external forces?
See, in 1971, we have seen that armed intervention by India took place with the help of the internal groups, Mukti
Yes, sir.
Vahini, and there were so many different groups which were willing to form a separate nation and which were willing to fight with the Indian forces. The situation of that time was this was the East Pakistan, and the armed assistance was provided by the Pakistan, and they have a huge gap between them, and they were geographically separated. So those scenarios were different. But when we talk about today's world, then there is always a possibility of intervention. But now Bangladesh itself is a separate nation, and India, on the global phase or in the world market, is trying to become a developed country, and a developing country is not every time will not be in a condition to come in war with any nation, because that will affect the economy and whole GDP of that nation. So as we talk, as when we discuss about the GDP and the development rate in India, then I can say कि Indian government will can interfere in the issue of the Bangladesh, but will try not to come with armed conflict with the Bangladesh, because that would definitely be an act of war. When in such situations, some other country sends their forces or comes the part of that violence with the use of forces, that means the act of war. That's the violation of international conventions, and that will also lead to the mm, that will also lead to the that will also lead to the underdevelopment of the nation. I think we can also go 5 or 10 years behind. We can also say there is a possibility of providing armed and financial assistance to the groups who are acting for protection of human rights in Bangladesh. Like we have seen during 1971, Indian forces provided armed help to the units who are working within the country at that time. So there is a possibility India can provide economic assistance and armed assistance to the groups who are internally working to protect these kind of rights. But as a developing nation, India will avoid to come in conflict with the neighboring country, or will to come in the war. They can unofficially provide some armed assistance or economic assistance by providing some arms, by providing rations, by providing training. As we have seen in 1971, Indian forces provided training to the rebellions in the Bangladesh. So that can happen. There is least possibility of India coming with the war with the forces of Bangladesh, because we don't have any objective for that purpose. Yeah.
So that was all from for the question. Do you have any closing words?
No, it was a nice session. Thank you. If you have any other question or some other question, you can ask.
So there are no more questions, sir. So in closing, we extend our heartfelt gratitude to you for accepting our invitation and delivering such an informative session. We trust that the audience found it both interesting and knowledgeable. Thank you once again, sir. We eagerly anticipate the opportunity to host you again. Thank you, sir.